Okay, so putting it all together, what we've done in chapter 10, how do you know when to use which test? And so the answer is it depends. So you're going to have to pay attention to what's written up in the problem. Are they talking about the proportion? If they're talking about proportions, if that's what you're dealing with, then you're going to be testing the population proportion. You'll use the sample proportion to test that. That means you'll be using the normal distribution, and you find that with StatCrunch under Stat, pick proportions, pick one sample. And then you'll have to make a choice of data or summary, but it'll almost always be summary in our class. So that'll be the option. We learned that in section 10.2. And on your inferential statistics cheat sheet, that's page 2. Page 2 would be what we have back here. All right, hold on. It's 10.1. There it is. 10.2. This guy right here with all these instructions. And yes, when you're doing this by hand on an exam or even for your own notes and work before your tests, you want to be practicing drawing these pictures. You want to actually practice finding these values. You might not always have to find them by hand, but you want to make sure you know how to, because we've shown how to do everything with the tables and or with StatCrunch and Excel. All right, now what if you're testing the mean? What if they're talking about averages in the problem? So if they're talking about the average, that's the population mean that you're trying to test. And you use the sample mean to test it. And that's using the T distribution. Remember Mr. Gossett, who worked at the brewery, the Guinness Brewery, he's the one that thought of that distribution for us. And we use that to test the mean. So if you're testing the mean, that's the distribution you'll use. You can find its values in the t-test if you need to for the critical values. Matter of fact, hold on, let me make a note. There we go, I just added that in. So when you're dealing with the proportions, you find the classical method critical values using the bottom row of the t-table or use the technology use technology. And I also thought you could also use the norm table. There's some info at the bottom of that table. All right, then for the t-table, for the critical values for the t-distribution, use the t-table, the rest of the t-table, or technology. To do the p-value test, the p-value method, and pretty much every other aspect of the test, you find that with StatCrunch under Stat, then you look up the t-statistics, and you pick one sample. And again, you'll have to make a choice. Were you given data, like they gave you a list of data points, or not? If not, then you have to use the summary. All right, then what about variance? Variance is sigma squared, and then the standard deviation is just plain sigma. And you use sample variance to test population variance and sample standard deviation to test population standard deviation. We learned that in section 10.4. It's page 4 of your cheat sheet. And you get the critical values for the classical method. I really like that. Classical method critical values. You get those with the chi-square table or technology, because you guys have the ability, as long as you're not on the paper and pencil tests, you have the ability to do stuff like that with either StatCrunch or Excel. They're both good. I think honestly StatCrunch is easier, but you know. So the chi-square table or using technology. And you find that stuff with StatCrunch under Stat, variance, one sample. You might want to make a note to yourself that StatCrunch only uses variance. So if you do have a standard deviation question, you're going to have to change it to variance. All right, so that's all there is to say about that. We better save our lovely technology files here, so make sure you save them. You should have 4 different pages, one with some random numbers, which was not a big deal. Then you have a proportion test right here, you have a mean test right here, and you had a variance standard deviation test right there with some extra info thrown in that we found along the way. All right, we're all done with chapter 10. I'll meet you back here on my lovely YouTube channel for chapter 11, which is more of the same, more hypothesis testing and more confidence intervals, but it's going to be more complicated because then we'll be working with 2 populations instead of just 1. All right, I'll see you then. Talk to you on the flip side.